Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Resilience webinar titled DISA, Comply to Connect in ICS. I am Tamel Harbison with the SAME National Team, and I will be assisting in the background with any technical issues you might experience throughout the presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping notes. You have entered the platform in a listen-only mode, but we ask that you double-check your microphones to make sure that they are muted. And any questions that you have throughout the presentation, we ask that you submit those in the Q&A tab in your toolbar. You may download today's presentation in the handout section as well as the PDH certificate. This webinar will be recorded and will be posted on the SAME Resilience COI webpage to view at a later date. With that, I'd like to turn it over for our moderator today, John Enyeart.
Good afternoon, all. John Enyeart with you, with the Resilience COI, and also with a full-time job with the U.S. Air Force. Very excited today to bring forth Colonel Air Force retired Dean Hullings and Brian Proctor from Forescout Technologies. Forescout is a cybersecurity consultation organization. They're touching the globe, 90 countries, over almost 4,300 it says on their website. Enterprises, government agencies, securing the enterprise of things. Very exciting organization that's reaching out to make a difference for many different agencies in their cybersecurity. And what we have today is a drill down on what DISA has for compliance requirements and how we can get our arms around that as a government or as private entities. At this time, I'm proud to introduce Dean Hullings and Brian Proctor.
Hey, thanks very much for having us here in SAME. Brian, why don't you go ahead and start us off and give the folks a little background about yourself.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Brian Proctor. A little history on me. Prior to joining Forescout, I spent the last 14 years as part of cybersecurity teams at two large energy companies in California, where I held a variety of positions, including principal ICS OT security architect, as well as leading their engineering and research and development team, really protecting critical infrastructure. I also love to speak and write, so I've spoken at a variety of kind of ICS or operational technology conferences and cybersecurity conferences. And so find me out there, ping me, DM me, send me a message. Love talking to folks who are tackling this difficult issue of securing these critical environments and networks. Dean?
Great, thanks very much. And I am Dean Hullings. As said, I'm a retired Air Force guy that did 26 years in the Air Force, ended my career at Air Force Space Command as the Chief of Cyber Requirements. And it was right about the time when the Air Force was really embracing cyber as a domain, if you will, and creating the cyber mission teams and supporting U.S. Cyber Command's stand up. So I had the opportunity to transition from being an IT guy more into a cyber warfare guy and build the capabilities that have become the cyber weapon systems that the Air Force uses today. So today, Brian and I are going to talk to you really about a couple things and how those things come together to help meet DoD's ICS cybersecurity needs with a program called Comply to Connect. So we're going to start with a discussion about converged IT and OT environments, how those differ and how they are very much alike. And then we'll get into what is in this thing that I call a Comply to Connect program that the Defense Information Systems Agency is running to implement comply to connect capabilities across the entire enterprise, including ICS networks and environments. Then we're going to open it up to some questions and answers. I think it's a relatively small group here today, so I hope we can engage in some conversations via that Q&A chat room that John brought up, and I think he's going to moderate that discussion for us. And we're going to go from there. So Brian, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you to open up the technical discussion.
Thanks, Dean. Hey, everyone. Yeah, so to start off, here at Forescout, as Dean mentioned, we're working with a variety of government agencies, private companies, helping secure what we're calling at Forescout the enterprise of things. And as you are all probably aware, the days of mainframe and just computers and data centers, that landscape of securing just those environments have changed, right? The threats have changed, the threat landscapes have changed. And now when we get all these, if you want to call them IoT devices to ICS, industrial control system devices, or operational or OT technology devices, or controllers managing and controlling a process, whether that's manufacturing something to power generation or transmission or distribution to oil and gas, refinery, upstream, downstream, midstream. All of these things now are getting intelligent, and they're all on a network. So connectivity is vastly increasing with things like 5G. So all of these things, if you're working, doesn't matter if it's Air Force, Navy, DOD, DOE, private sector, all of these kind of new technologies are greatly expanding as technology is adopted to meet certain business purposes. And additionally, they're all being interconnected in this convergence of IT, OT, IoT, IIoT. All of these things are happening right now in this explosion. And what we're trying to do here at Forescout is bring a level of understanding and active defense to these types of technology, understanding how they behave and what the usage of those technologies are. So as this landscape changes and how these technologies are brought onto the network, for those folks who wear the cybersecurity hats in their organization, you have to really understand that as these threat vectors change, there's going to be more and more attacks. And I want to briefly just kind of touch on kind of some high-profile incidents that have happened in these kind of ICS environments. Probably the most famous incident a while back ago, Stuxnet. But as you can see, as we move closer to 2021, just the sheer frequency and impacts of these incidents are increasing. There's actually even some that aren't on this list, like the Mirai botnet, which really kind of focused on IoT cameras and addressing kind of default or weak credentials in those. There's actually a very recent Venkana, if you've been following that, those types of cameras, people logging in and seeing video from thousands of companies around the world and entities, even to the most recent kind of ICS OT incident. For those beer drinkers like me, Coors Molson, they just had an incident. We're not really sure what's happening. It's going on right now, and these details aren't publicly known. But the reality is these types of incidents can impact operations to critical environments, no matter kind of what you're doing. If it's something for DOD or private sector, the reality is these types of threat actors and these types of attacks are happening and are impacting critical in environments. So that's what we're really trying to address here at Forescout, and talk to people about what are some best practices and principles that you can adopt in these environments. So these are kind of the 5 main principles and practices that we talk about a lot. First is identify, knowing what you have. I think we keep hearing it over and over. You can't protect what you can't see. If you don't know it exists, you can't really do much about that. So starting with identify, then moving to assess and understanding, okay, some device, whether it's something like an iPhone or someone's computer or an industrial controller or some type of video camera, if it connects to the network, it has a security hygiene. It has a compliance and risk status, and understanding and continuously assessing that is essential to understanding kind of the security posture in these environments. Then obviously segmentation, right? I know when I was in the energy sector, private sector, we try to do our best to kind of segment and limit kind of IT from OT stuff, because we know if things happen in IT, we don't want that to flow back into kind of our critical ICS and OT environment. So understanding segmentation, trying to minimize the attack surface or blast surface. If there is something that happens, you want to segment these types of environments. And then enforcement. So zero trust is something that's talked a lot in the community. So having those zero trust policies, only allowing things to talk what they need to talk, and if things deviate from a certain policy, hey, let's take control actions. And those control actions in IT might be a lot different from the ICS environment and those types of networks, because obviously you don't want to impact the operations, the reliability and availability. That is of the utmost importance. So ensuring mission critical systems stay online and operational in those types of environments is very key. So the enforcement policies are much different in IT than they are in ICS or OT. And then obviously orchestration. We all know we have a finite number of people and staff and resources, and be able to orchestrate and automate workflows and responses. That's something that we all are probably striving to achieve. So looking at these principles, it's all about understanding kind of we've all probably been doing these things in IT for a decade plus. But now as this landscape is changing, these new devices are coming on our network, our methods need to evolve to really address this new set of devices, these new kind of complications that they introduced. And so our methods need to evolve to kind of reduce the risk and mitigate the risk, because we're all in the business of risk mitigation. So looking at identify, right, common methods on the IT side are leveraging agents. So if you have an EDR-like type of technology or an antivirus and you're running agents, it's difficult to run those things, if not impossible to run those things on controllers and see what's on the device, because it's an embedded device or it's running a real-time operating system. So you can't really do that. So what can you do? Well, you can leverage things like deep packet inspection and look at all the communications and the behaviors of the device. So if something changes, you can alert and notify kind of the right people. Sticking with identify too, a lot of people use Nmap and are leveraging Nmap to enumerate the network and figure out what exists. Well, in these mission critical environments, that approach might not be the best approach, because you don't want to tip things over. And a lot of these devices, you send certain number of packets or a certain kind of protocol, it could break these types of technologies. So looking at things like, hey, let's not touch the device, but maybe let's communicate with a network infrastructure that's supporting that device. So, hey, it's connected to a network switch. Well, can we query the network switch that it's on to learn more information about that device? So really changing our methods that we've grown to love on the IT side and evolving them to address these new ICS and enterprise of things method. Same with to assess these devices, right? I'm sure many of you are familiar with vulnerability like scanners, right? The Tenables of the world and all these kind of things that scan and look for known vulnerabilities. Same with WMI. If it's a Windows box or a Linux box, there's ways to leverage built-in functions and capabilities of the common operating system. But all of these kind of ICS and enterprise of things devices, they're not running those common operating systems. And as we said earlier, doing vulnerability scans in these environments can be very touchy-feely. I know I tell a story when I was working in my energy company. My manager at the time actually kicked off a vulnerability scan in a power generation plant, and the whole plant went down. This is not a joke. This is something that's very, very serious. So so you want to be careful when kind of applying IT methods into these critical ICS environments and take other methods. And so looking at assessment, well, what else can you do? And as I talked about earlier, let's look at the behavior of these devices. Let's look at, hey, are they communicating to known bad actors, like known bad, are they trying to reach out to a domain that's associated with a known campaign or threat actor, or some IP address that's associated with the recent SolarWinds attack, right? So understanding that and doing it kind of passively and monitoring the traffic passively, that's just one added kind of method and capability that makes a lot of sense in these critical ICS and EOT like environments. And then looking at segmentation, right? We all have various ways to do boundary protection, whether that's with something like a next generation firewall or with a router with ACLs or a switch. And we need to start looking at, hey, can we simulate segmentation and can we adopt principles of zero trust? That just makes a lot of sense because as we all know, right, we need to adopt a defense in depth type of approach to these things. So we got to leverage every tool in our toolbox that we can to minimize risk to these types of assets. And then from an enforcement standpoint, looking at things like host-based firewalls and various compliance checks, we really want to make this continuous and have adaptive ways to change things on the fly, because changes are going to happen. They do occur in these types of environments. They might not happen as frequently as IT environments, right? But when they do happen, our security controls should be adaptive and continuous. And so we want to ensure that that happens. And we obviously want to ensure that when we do take some type of action, it once again doesn't impact the reliability and availability of these mission critical types of assets. And then lastly, from an orchestration standpoint, right? I'm sure many of you have heard about playbooks and different policy engines like correlation and different ways to do that within IT. You know, we're looking to evolve and help people to automate segmentation and automatically heal different types of conditions when we see those things and to take action, because we believe even in these critical ICS environments, there are certain tasks, and whether it's a security task or even kind of operational tasks, we can help automate certain actions to really achieve a great outcome. So in summary, you know, those IT principles that we've known to love, they do have a lot of applicability in ICS and the enterprise of things. It's just the way you achieve those and the methods you go about doing that need to involve, because these assets and types of devices that are operating the most critical type of mission critical environments, they just take different approaches to achieve the same outcomes. So want to talk about a case study. This is if you're working in mission critical facilities, kind of people we work with, they have this challenge, right? Where, as I mentioned earlier, they've been doing great things for a long time on the IT side, but kind of whether it's building automation systems or building management systems that are controlling data centers or mission critical facilities, whether it's power generation plants or with SCADA and or some type of distributed control system. A lot of people just haven't over the last decade or so really focused and had a lot of visibility and understanding into these environments. So as I said, bring that visibility and that real-time threat detection to kind of address these new threats out there and to secure these types of environments, really helping them really adopt in a ICS OT program. As I mentioned, many of you probably have a security operations center and are leveraging a variety of tools, technologies, peoples, and processes. Well, now I think what's really gaining steam is really adapting those technologies and processes and people, and introduce this whole new set of data from these building automation systems, from these ICS environments, and really leveraging the investments that they've already made in technology as well as process, and just adding, as I mentioned, these new data sets so they can achieve the outcomes of a ICS threat management program like we help this case study with, as well as just understanding kind of visibility, what's going on, and also understanding maintenance scheduling. So by adopting some of these kind of new methods of doing deep packet inspection, we can also see a lot of operational things occurring and controlled engineers doing certain activities and bringing visibility into those, saying, hey, if someone is stopping my controller or changing its firmware version, is there an associated ticket with that? Is there scheduled downtime at my facility? Does it make sense? And if it doesn't, hey, maybe we should look into this. What's going on? What's occurring? So it's all about reducing mean time to detection and reducing mean time to response and recovery. So with that said, I think I'm going to hand it over to Dean and talk to you guys about the Comply to Connect program.
Awesome, Brian. Thanks very much. As I said in the introduction, I've been doing this for 26 years now in the Air Force, and then another 4 or 5 years here in industry. And it's a privilege for me to take part in these kinds of events, because I learned something from guys like Brian that have been doing this in a completely different world than my experience has been throughout my career. So it's always a pleasure. So let's take this and apply it a little bit. The diversity of the networks, the reliance on everything that's connected today is all about the mission effectiveness, the mission readiness, right? So all of these systems that Brian brought forth and is talking about in the industrial control systems and other operational technologies, people are depending on those systems just as much as they're depending on the desktops and laptops and command and control systems to get the mission accomplished. One example I was in the launch business for a while, and there was an air conditioner at a satellite tracking facility that was acting up, and the temperature in the satellite tracking facility was rising. Well, that meant we did not meet our launch criteria, and we had thousands of people at the launch base ready to light the candle and put a mission critical satellite on orbit, but we just could not, because we couldn't trust whether that air conditioner was going to be there to support the systems, or whether they were going to start shutting down automatically because of the temperature rising in the data center. That's just one example. You could talk about the problems that happened in Texas because of a heavy snowstorm this year. You could talk about the situation down at Tyndall Air Force Base not too long ago with a tremendous hurricane. And all of these acts of God are one thing, but what happens if you take those same effects from a cyber hacker in these industrial control systems, in these critical systems to our missions? So that's what Comply to Connect was trying to get to from its early onset days years ago, is gaps in effectiveness in looking at these problems in different ways, in looking at these problems across the entire enterprise rather than just the IT systems or the desktops with email and maybe some web applications, or truly command and control systems. Looking at the gaps in the effectiveness of the tools, but also applying these same cybersecurity standards and principles that Brian talked about. The identification, the assessment, the segmentation, enforcement, and orchestration that Brian talked about. But then getting back to what he also said was the gaps in efficiency. We had plenty of tools across the DoD, but they weren't efficient because they weren't working together. And one of the things that, as a squadron commander, I used to complain about, and I heard it a lot when I was at the headquarters at Air Force Space Command: don't just give me yet another tool that I got to train my airman, my soldier, my sailor, my Marine on how to use. Give me something that's going to help me get these tools working together to make them more efficient, so I don't have to put gray matter, if you will, on every single problem that's in the network. Two big pillars of what Comply to Connect was pushing towards. And as Brian said, there were so many similarities in what we did in IT environments that we could apply maybe just in a different way in OT environments or IoT environments, as Internet of Things devices get connected to the network, that we felt that we could tackle this all together in a single program. So you take all these pieces and you bring them all together and put them into a toolbox that we call the Comply to Connect program. Again, getting the effectiveness across all 7 categories of devices that are on our networks today. And these categories aren't something that we in industry dreamt up, if you will. This is what US Cyber Command put out as the 6 different categories. And yes, I know there's 7 there. They've recently broken out the industrial control systems, what we're talking about today, because of the real understanding of the importance of those systems to meet mission needs at every base, camp, post, and station across the Department of Defense. So they included them in the past in the platform IT, just that bigger, broader, generic category, but they've broken them out recently. They've always had the Internet of Things broken out as its own thing, because that's kind of a growing dependency, if you will, for our missions. But it's also the most growing category of devices that we're applying connectivity to. Network infrastructure, network user devices like printers and smart boards, obviously workstations and servers have always been part of the IT community and cybersecurity community. And the new connectivity of mobile devices with 5G being proliferated out there have added to this. So this is the diversity of what Cyber Command says we need to protect today, and it includes the systems, as I mentioned, that most of you are interested in securing yourselves. And then the efficiency, having the ability in a comply to connect capability to orchestrate, as Brian said, between the different tools. There's not a single tool out there that's going to give everybody everything they need to manage, secure, assess threats, and really affect the different pieces that come together in this very diverse network environment that we call the DoDIN, the DoD Information Network. In addition, there's lots of tools already out there that the DoD has. Some enterprise tools like the host-based security system and the ACAS, Assured Compliance Assessment Solution, that are two IT-related enterprise-wide solutions that are used today. But then a whole lot of other pocket, I'll call them pocket capabilities, both in IT and OT environments, that are used to manage the devices, to segment the network enclaves like firewalls and those kinds of things, and to secure them as well. So they wanted to have these programs to be able, this program to be able to bring those stovepipes of excellence into an integrated cybersecurity solution across the entire enterprise. That's what we did with Comply to Connect. There is guidance out coming straight out of the DoD CIO. It's broken down these steps to completion, as you can see here, into various steps, starting all the way to the left side, with what we call, crawl, walk, run type capabilities. Let's not jump in and start turning things off until we really understand what's out there. Discover all those devices, identify what they are and what they're communicating with based on the category of devices, the category of users that are using these devices, and acknowledging that in many cases, especially in your environments, there is not a user of a device. It's a userless device, a thermostat on a wall, a sensor in a pipeline, those kinds of things. Really understand them through interrogation, some active capabilities, some passive capabilities, to really understand and assess what that device looks like from a cybersecurity hygiene, from a connectivity standpoint, from a user base. Is this a general officer using this device, using this laptop? Is this a mission critical system, or is this some kind of sensor that might be monitoring the lighting in the base post camp station bowling alley? Well, that's less critical than, say, the sensors monitoring the lighting on a flight line or some deployed asset around a weapons depot or those kinds of things. And then automate that remediation. If we find a problem and an airman or a soldier has to go out and fix it more than a couple times, let's automate that process. Let's let machines take care of those rote memory, do the same thing every time that takes 45 minutes per box. Add that up over 50 boxes. Now you're talking about taking a week's worth of time just for one problem. Well, there's lots of problems out there. So as much as possible, without impacting mission, let's automate that remediation. Brian talked about simulation. So before we go in and kick off that automated, let's simulate what that action is going to take on the network, so we know, well, maybe we can't automate it in this particular sector of a command and control system or an industrial control system monitoring the command post operations. Let's have that simulation so we can automate where we can and where it makes sense, and we can take affirmative action using our people appropriately where extra care and concern is necessary. And then making sure the authorizations are there, making sure that each device that's connected and has access to different pieces has a reason to have that access to pieces. You look at some of the problems that have happened in the past, like a network device like a camera getting compromised, but that's not where the adversary wants to go. They really want to get to that command and control system, or that's where the bad guy wants to go over to the billing automation system and take intellectual property or dollars or those kinds of malicious activities that happen through what we call lateral movement in the networks. So network access control has really evolved into more just a very broad zero trust access control. I want to make sure that every transaction is authorized by the user and the endpoint before I let it happen on the network. So authorization is becoming more and more critical to really understand and make happen. So your devices are only talking to the servers that care about the temperatures or care about the pressures on the pipelines, and not making lateral movement across the network because they've been compromised. And then making sure all of that is enforced and situational awareness is happening at all the different levels of command, so that when problems happen, when problems arrive, because they will, I can guarantee you in my 20, 30 years in this business, you cannot make sure every problem doesn't happen. You can only minimize and then be able to react quickly when that problem happens. So having that situational awareness of the entire enterprise, having the right segments so that when a problem arises over here, you already know that it's going to be contained over here and won't spread to the other parts of your network. That's critical, and that's nirvana of the Comply to Connect program. They're rolling that out in a very aggressive timeline. That's one of the reasons why we're trying to help get the message across to all different environments, not just the IT and the A6 or J6 people in that community, but get this message out across as many places as we can that rely on connected assets, because today I believe is the 30th, which means you can see on this chart here, and this chart was lifted directly out of their guidance, they're going to start keeping tabs on this in 2 days. So the directive is out, and people got to start answering to Cyber Command and Joint Force Headquarters DODIN operations in that step one. How many devices, what kind of devices are connected into the DODIN? So you can see these timelines here. I won't walk you all the way through it because that in 2 days was probably enough to make your head explode and go, uh-oh, we need to learn a little bit more about this program. So let's talk a little bit about more about the program. It is again DISA driven, Defense Information Systems Agency. If you're not familiar with that DISA acronym in your community, this is a program that is in the FIDEP. So right now it's declared 5 years, but don't let that scare you that it's 5 years and then they're going to cut you off and make you pay for something. Their intent is that this program will go until the technology has surpassed it and it gets replaced by another program. They are paying for the licenses, the software licenses to be able to utilize the capabilities. And they're also paying for the training for people to be able to learn how to implement and use these capabilities, both on the classified and unclassified, so SIPR and NIPRNet. If you get above that in the high side, some of the intelligence community organizations, they'll be working on their own because their budgets come out of other pots of money for those high side, they call them, network infrastructure and support. Implementation, there's support for that. Either some of that may be on the backs of people. I've seen people modifying existing administrative programs to include these new capabilities, the system administration and operations. And again, the training would be available to those people. I've seen people looking for new professional services, either to just help, hey, help me get it in, turned on, plugged in, and then I'll take over from there, to, hey, I don't even have enough people to think about a new product, at least for the first couple of years. Tell me who your certified partners are so I can get some staff augmentation. I can get it, put it into the budget to make this happen across the board. General design, you can see that there, that this is all going to roll up, right? So what's happening in this enclave at a base will get rolled up to a base level, get rolled up to a MAGCOM level or another command center level, gets rolled all the way up to eventually up to the cyber command level, or other combatant commanders. So everybody has situational awareness of the risk of the cybersecurity terrain that they're responsible for. Flexibility in design, we can get into that if that's interesting to some folks in the Q&A period. But bottom line, the tools that are being fielded are highly flexible, from boxes on every site to manage multiple sites from a single box at a central location and a hybrid therein. Resilience is built into the offering that's coming out from the program office to make sure that the truly mission critical systems don't fail because of something in the lines of these controlling functions coming out of the Comply to Connect program. All right, so I think that's all I had as far as presentations. Brian and I would love to entertain some questions that you have, and we'll turn it over to John to moderate that question and answer period before we wrap things up.
Indeed. Dean, Brian, most excellent. You are definitely hitting on some areas that most of us are just on the periphery, and especially with industrial control systems. We're all grappling to be able to truly understand how to stay connected, even if we think we have a closed system. And all these aspects are truly essential. We really got to understand them. So first question we want to hit today is typical shortfalls. When you're advising an agency, when you're advising a company, private or public, but I guess a lot of these may be private municipalities or utility companies and the like. Where do they usually fall short in their of the 5 steps between the IDSS, segment, enforce, orchestrate? Is it in their planning? Is it their resourcing? Or do they have all that worked out? They hire the right folks, but yet they just don't execute and do the enforcement and the orchestration quite right. What have you seen in your time? Is there a couple examples you can give us of without diming out the agency, of course, where you saw some shortfalls that are seemingly typical more than you would expect? Over.
Got it. Dean, why don't I start with kind of the private sector, the municipalities, utility sector, which I worked in. I work with them a lot. And shortfalls is a couple things. One is, as Dean said, kind of that crawl, walk, run type of natural flow. So someone just trying to run very, very quickly. Having a methodology about how you go about this, especially in mission critical and industrial control systems, you want to make sure that you mature at the right speed and you don't skip steps. You don't try to jump into the deep end if you can't swim, right? So definitely starting with kind of the foundational things of, hey, let's just learn what we have. Dean talked about that Comply to Connect, and it looks like they phase those out in those steps, which makes a lot of sense. So going too fast is probably the most common thing that I personally see. Additionally, as well, as I mentioned earlier, most whether it's private sector or whomever it is, most of you all probably have IT security programs that have a level of maturity in various things like threat detection and response, right? Versus vulnerability management versus there's a variety of different categories. And if you're trying to adopt this in ICS, OT, and IoT, the reality is you've got to have that foundational type of people and capabilities and process first. So make sure that you're not, if you're trying to do ICS threat detection, but you're not doing any threat detection in IT, you don't have the right resources and processes or technology to support that function, might not makes a lot of sense to just jump into ICS threat detection. You might want to start in another area of security and figure out, when looking at your ICS or OT program, maybe it makes more sense to focus on a different piece. So Dean, feel free to add your comments.
Yeah, so Brian, you touched on a couple key points there. The biggest thing I see is, I don't know how to say this without just being blunt. I see people believe they know what's on their system and what's connected, and they know, and they have configuration management boards. How dare anybody would never put anything on my network. I'm in the DoD. We control this type of stuff. And it's just not true. I mean, I was a comm guy for a very long time. I got drug into a behind closed doors, we'll call it that, on the Air Force Base where I was the squadron commander. And they showed me a network and said, "You're responsible for this mess. Why is it such a mess?" And I had no idea the thing was even there. So the visibility is as Brian said, the first step. Comply to Connect, we're talking about that today because it's the DoD program. Department of Homeland Security created a sister program, we call it, called Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, the CDM program. And they made that program, they made similar capabilities open to any of the departments and agencies, the civilian departments and agencies across our government. There's more than 10 million endpoints right now being controlled through that program, being secured through that program. But there was an agency, I kid you not, that they came back and said, we had 200% more devices connected to our network than we knew that we had. Well, every single one of those devices that is unknown is an unknown threat to the environment, to the entire environment, not just to that device, but to the entire environment. And so that's the key point that, we started out talking about. Brian said it, you can't defend, you can't secure, you can't protect what you don't know is there. And that's the biggest thing. And then the second big piece is, of course, John, you brought this up during the question, is the resources. Nobody has more resources. Nobody is going to get lots of resources to go do something brand new. So you have to bring to the table the ability to, even if it's, suck it up for a short time, you got to show that progress that says, I'm going to make things better in the future for my people, for my security, all at the same time. That was a very key point in the development of the Comply to Connect program when it was looked at, when the requirements were looked at, when the solutions were looked at inside the Pentagon. The CAPE, it's the process that controls all the money for the Department of Defense. The CAPE process, they're not technicians, they're not technologists, they're money people, they're bean counters on steroids, they're bean counters. And they had to see that this program was going to save money as implemented over time, before that they would give it their head nod and say, yep, we can put some money behind this. And it became the official program of record. So John, I hope between the two of us that answered your question.
Very good. Next question.
I'm passionate about this stuff. Can you tell, John?
I can tell. Dean, you are just the man for the job. Brian, appreciate it. You are both a wealth of knowledge. So how does C2C, how does Comply to Connect relate to, we got three different thoughts here of risk management framework, authority to operate, and then the UFC for facility related control systems. The UFC 41006. Again, cybersecurity for facility related control systems. If you're familiar with those documents, and of course, risk management framework in itself as a concept, could you talk to us about how C2C, does it incorporate that, or is it more parallel? Would you compare those all together? Over.
Yeah. So all very good questions. So, RMF, risk management framework. Absolutely, the risk management framework is all based on assessments. Well, all of those assessments are based on understanding what is connected, what the posture of it is that's connected, how those connections connect to each other, and where those connections fit into the criticality of a mission, right? So what Comply to Connect is doing is actually delivering automated IT-based tools to help you gather that information so you can make those risk assessments. And then the policy engine goes in that we can make those assessments into actionable policies on the network action. So if risk is too high, if this condition exists, risk is too high to let it continue, we can cut it off, or we can quarantine it so it only has limited access, or those kinds of things. So what the Comply to Connect delivered capabilities become is a platform that you can use to assess and implement the things that you're addressing through the risk management framework. Similar things in UFC, the UFC directive there. I'm not an expert there. I know that we've discussed those things when we were out participating in one of the Army Corps of Engineers working groups. And I can get some specifics on that back to you, Michelle, if you want to drop. I just dropped both Brian's and my email addresses into the chat room here. If you want to send me some stuff, I can dig that, or send me a request. I can dig out how we answered that specific question after that came up during that workshop. Unless Brian, unless you're comfortable with talking to that.
I don't know that specific standard, but I know that we've got a variety of mappings to like the NIST cybersecurity framework. These are more kind of public frameworks, as well as IEC 62443. That's kind of the go-to standard for industrial control systems. So I'm not sure how that's leveraged or if that's leveraged, but that's a really big one as well.
Yeah. Okay. And as far as an authority to operate, I assume that's the acronym ATO. That's the one I know in this environment. So I'll answer that. And if I'm not right, then you get a bonus answer. I don't know. But so, I mean, our system, our capabilities needed an authority to operate on the network as well. But what we can become is part of your solution to be able to control. I know parts of an authority to operate is what do you do when things go wrong, right? So if there are policies that can be built into your systems that would trigger that orchestration that we're talking about to trigger network level actions that we can take, then we can be part of, I don't want to say we're going to replace, but we can be part of the security pieces that go into getting an authority to operate on a networked environment. So Michelle, I hope that answers your questions. And again, if not, go ahead and follow up with more specifics and we'll get back to you.
Excellent. Yeah, just for everyone's essay, Dean did put on both Brian and his email address there to forescout.com. So please do copy that and keep it for your records later. So Paul Graham is asking about C2C and implementation at the base level. So what about the installation level? Because what we saw was overall program and DoD wide. So let's drill down to when we just look at the base itself. Who exactly is going to be driving that? Is it going to be more on the comm side? In ICS, we're really talking about public works and the civil engineers. So who's driving that is from what you can tell, or is there a partnership that needs to occur that has not been made? So all the different milestones at a base level, the systems at a base level that they're going to be considered, and how ICS works into that, even closed networks for energy management, for the SCADA systems, for utilities, and all the like. Dean?
Yeah, so great question, and of course the perfect answer in any question of that magnitude is it depends, right? So Paul, I'm not sure whether you're Army, Air Force, Navy, or Marine Corps, but all of the services, or maybe one of the Fourth Estate organizations, all of the services are kind of going about this in a different way. Specifically on the OT type networks, the industrial control system networks, we're just starting to have those kinds of discussions, which is really, again, one of the reasons why we're privileged to be able to talk to you here today. So we can start having those conversations. But on the more IT side of things, on the more communication side of things, the ability of I'll tell you what I know best because I came out of the Air Force. The Air Force divides the entire Air Force AFNet, Air Force network, the AFNet up into two major sections. A third section, if you include all of the the Air National Guard bases, and all of them are controlled by a network operations center. An INOSC, we used to call them. I don't think that's the right term anymore. I got gray on my beard for a reason, right? But these command and control centers will have bases under them that an organization, an enterprise management of the appliances down at the base that are doing these controlling functions of the devices will then get managed at these different control centers. And then those control centers will roll that visibility up to the 16th Air Force, which is the AF Cyber, if you will. And when they'll have visibility but won't have any touch, go break things, they'll be able to command and control then, hey, we're seeing a new risk that has just come out, and it looks like these 3 bases out of our 10 that we're monitoring, these 3 bases need to address a security policy to be able to manage and control the impact of this new risk. So command and control, as it is, across the board, will flow down, but it's all based on the information that'll be coming up from the base levels. So in the particular cases of industrial control systems, yeah, I agree with you. How does that get rolled out? I've had, again, back to the Air Force, I've had great conversations with Mr. Edishiba, with General, what the heck's your general's name, and the commander of the AFCAC, John Allen. There you go, John Allen, who I went to war college with. And okay, how are we going to do this? Because I can give you all the information you need, but then what do you want to shape if this exists, take this action? Because all of it in the comply to connect capabilities being delivered, it's there. The policy engine is very, very, very granular, that if this happens, take this action. Or if this and this and this and this and this, but not this, this, and this, then take an action. And that action doesn't have to be cut them off at the knees. That action can very well just be open a trouble ticket, alert somebody, knock somebody upside the head via an email that they need to take an action. So back to the crawl, walk, run. Specifically, industrial control systems, we're very much in that crawl stage to start having these conversations now that the capability is moving out there and being proliferated across all of the base, post, camp stations to make it work the way you need it to work.
I think we've got to we're right on time, but Paul had another good question here, Dean. You might know, how is this any different from U.S. Air Force previous initiatives that focused on asset identification, asset management? Maybe since you have experience there, maybe you know, and maybe talk about the different approaches that this program is taking.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So a lot of the asset identification in the military today is based on tools that were designed for desktops and laptops, very much IT focused. I mentioned it earlier, the host-based security system and the ACAS Assured Compliance Assessment Solution. Both of those systems are IT products, very good ones, don't get me wrong. They're very much IT products, but a couple things. One, the HBSS solution relies on an agent to be put on an endpoint that then has to talk back to a server for it to work properly. Again, very effective when it's working, but they get corrupt. They get bad supporting files that have gone, end of life and haven't been updated. So you're dealing with outdated information, or the process on the endpoint just quits working. So they're not effective. Back to that thing I was talking about early on, effectiveness. ACAS is the same way. That's a vulnerability scanner. It looks across all the devices across the network in the scope of what some ops center is responsible for. And if a device isn't connected at the time of that scan, it's a laptop, for instance, that somebody took home, then it could come back on the network and have a bunch of vulnerabilities that won't get found until that next time-based scan. So what Comply to Connect is delivering is, again, tools that can take impact, do their job immediately as a device connects. So the first thing that happens when a device connects is we can check to see whether that HBSS framework is running the way it's supposed to be, configured the way it's supposed to be, connected to and talking back to the devices the way it's supposed to be. We can talk to the vulnerability scanners. In this case, Tenable is what's across the DoD at this time, and see whether that device was in fact scanned within the right parameters and was anything found that needs to take action. In the case of the OT systems, we can take completely passive activity to make sure that the devices that are connected and are constantly connected. In OT environments, they don't come on and go off and come on and go off all the time like they do, more in the IT environments. But we can passively look at those devices, where they're talking, what they're talking to, what they're talking about, looking at the packets and doing deep packet inspection, those kinds of things to assess, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing and only what they're supposed to be doing? And if not, I better tell somebody, because somebody's about to have a bad day, right?
Well, I think we're out of time. Yeah, John.
Indeed. Go ahead, Brian.
No, I think we're running out of time. Looks like Paul got back and with a lot of acronyms here. But Paul, if you got more questions,
he's talking about right there. That's the examples of the different asset management software, especially in the Air Force side, that the public works civil engineers are using today. Builder, Paver, all looking at different life cycle components of built infrastructure, vertical or pavement. Tririga is tracking all of our various preventive maintenance to the built infrastructure and future projects for recapitalization and modernization and the like. And so right now, the program managers for those systems are looking to make that connection. But part of what Paul is asking is, what is the IT side, or what is DISA looking to try to pull them in, or is that every functional system is on its own, and they've got to figure out how to comply to connect, or they're going to be severed, and that's just all there is to it. There's no motivation for DISA to try to help functionals connect to the network. How would you characterize that? Over.
Dean, why don't you take that?
Sure, I will. And Paul, there's not a perfect answer to that, as I can almost tell in your capital letter frustration, because I lived it too, right? We are talking about IT, or connected assets, not asset management as a whole. But yes, I would say that the program is designed to do what you want it to do. Whether we get the right people talking to the program office and get this, engineering solution discussion going is, I think, going to be up to everybody that's on this call, and hopefully some of the senior leaders that will get wind of this. I've had lots of discussions, as I mentioned before, with senior leaders in all the services that are saying, hey, we need help with the data that you're telling us you're going to collect, because I can make a bridge. I don't know what to do about this IT asset, or whether it's a threat to me or not. I don't know those things. That's what the cyber community, that's what the SIX community are the experts for, and I need some help. And so I think the right answer to your question is, let's get those questions out there so we can put the pressure on the IT community, i.e. the program office, to start developing solutions, to start developing answers based on the capabilities that they know they can deliver to you. I hope that helps.
Good call. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Dean. And may have to go with what you mentioned before, Dean, about certified partners, having the right kind of folks involved as experts, the right SMEs to help you through. If there's a easy way that the non-experts can know who the experts are, what certifications that your partner should have, that'd be a great thing for us to post, and we can do that even after the fact, as we are definitely over time, but appreciate everyone's enthusiasm. Dean, any words on that before we close?
No, like I say, we've got certified partners that we're working with in both sides of the environment, IT and OT. So, reach out to us and we can help you find them. And other than that, I would like to just close with my thoughts, and then I'll turn it over to Brian with a big thank you. I would love to do this again next week with 50 more people, if that's what helps your community get moving out on this program, because I do believe it can help the overall cybersecurity of everything that's connected to the network. Brian.
Yeah, no, same as Dean. Thank you, everyone. Really enjoyed our conversation, and please reach out with questions. Dean and I are very passionate about this. We talk on these topics pretty much all day, all week long. So we are here to help and to be resources of yours. So thanks again.
Again, I appreciate both of you from Forescout for giving us such a great time, great insights, and we look forward to get more questions over the time as it gets posted on the COI. Tamel, last admin, over.
Yes, thank you all for a great presentation, and thank you, John, for moderating this session for us. Before we close, we do have our national 2021 virtual JETC, our Joint Engineering Training Conference. It says March, but it should say May of 17th through the 21st. You can find out more information about the conference, as the different sessions, education sessions we'll be having, the keynote speakers we'll be having, all sorts of fun things at the SAMEJETC.org webpage. And I believe early bird registration is open. So if you want to get those discounted prices for registration, I recommend going to the website now and getting yourself registered. But thank you all for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep, y'all take care. Excellent.